In this video we're going to go over how to replace the display assembly on an iPhone 5S. Now before we start working on this, there's a few things we want to check to make sure the phone is fully functional. So let's go ahead and tap the power button. Phone lights up, and using my thumb here that I have entered into the biometric scanner is make sure that that's functioning. By laying my finger across, it should unlock the phone without me having to enter a code. So my battery is currently at 50%. I'm going to plug in a charging cable. The battery should turn green with a little lightning bolt indicating that it's charging. I want to make sure that during the course of all the tests, the battery climbs at least 1%, indicating the phone is actually charging. Now I'm going to test the home button by double tapping it. The screen should pop up. I'm going to test my digitizer to see if there's any dead spots or defects by grabbing an icon and holding it so they all become jiggly, and then moving that icon around the screen. Now should the icon drop, that could indicate a possible bad area, which may cause us to look at further possible damage of the phone. I have cell service, I have Wi-Fi, and the current date and time is correct. Now we want to test the cameras, both front and rear. In doing so, we want to also slide this over and record a video. While at the rear camera and recording video, it also tests the rear microphone to make sure it's functioning. And then flipping it over to the front camera and recording video, we're testing the front microphone located right here in the ear speaker grill. The other thing we want to do is test the lower microphone, the speaker, the volume up, down, and mute. So the mute, you can simply rock, run your volume up, volume down, see the indicator moving. And then by opening voice memo, and recording a video, that'll let us test the lower microphone. Test 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. We'll save that and play it back. Now by playing it back, we're also should hear the audio come out of the speaker down here. Test 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. Now to test the ear speaker and the proximity sensor, take the speaker icon up here and tap it. It'll turn gray, indicating that audio is now played through the ear speaker. And then by taking our finger and setting it over the proximity, or moving the device up to your ear to listen to the ear speaker, and you look down at the screen will darken, and when you move the phone away from your face, the screen will light back up as simulated here. Okay, and lastly, before we power down the device, we want to make sure that any open applications are completely closed. Double tap the home button, slide the apps up to close until you're only left with the remaining ones showing the icons. And you see our battery percentage has jumped to 52%, so we know that the phone is charging. We'll go ahead and disconnect that and power down the phone. Now another important thing about the iPhone 5 series, whether it be a 5, 5S, or 5C, is we want to make sure that there's no frame damage at all. You want to look closely at each corner. If any of the corners are bashed in, your new display assembly will not sit in, and if you force it in, you could damage the new display assembly. One easy way to test it is you give a visual looking around your corners, but also by setting the phone on a flat level surface and using something as simple as a post-it note and seeing if it slides under the frame. You see on this one here, this lower corner, I can slide the paper underneath. This tells me this lower corner is slightly bent upward. Now once you have frame damage, it makes the repair a lot more difficult, especially if it's at the upper end or if you have a cross pattern. So if this corner is damaged and this corner, just like this, the frame is slightly twisted. Now, being that the logic board is screwed into the frame, with the phone being twisted, it is causing pressure on the logic board as well, which could potentially cause future problems with your phone. And it also voids any warranty you have with Apple and with iCracked with frame damage. Because that we know that over time, especially with a bent or twisted frame, that it's going to weaken the display assembly, and it could cause the glass to separate from the plastic bezel, which is what surrounds the outer perimeter here. So I'm going to go ahead and proceed with the repair, even though I know there's slight frame damage on here. And we shut down the phone and we waited until we saw the swirl completely disappear, indicating the phone is completely shut off. Okay, one of the first steps of opening a phone is you're going to have to remove the two pencil lobe screws located at the left and right of the charging port by using a pencil lobe screwdriver. I highly recommend that you have a magnetic mat to set all the screws on to keep them organized and prevent from losing them. Now my two pencil lobe screws are out. And the only other tools I'm going to need to open this is a Phillips screwdriver, possibly an iSesmo, but I'm going to need a suction cup. Now the thing about the iPhone 5S is the biometric scanner built into the home button is a cable that's attached to the behind the lightning port connector inside the phone. So when you open this, you have to do so carefully. You can only lift about ½ an inch. Any further, you could potentially rip that home button cable. If it was damaged, you could replace the cable, but the biometric scanner will no longer function for your device since it is uniquely locked to its specific logic board. Now there's several ways to open up the 5S. We have the suction cup method, which you can put on there and very gently pop the screen up. And using an iSesmo, we can get in here and very gently open it up. Another method is the iCracked, which goes on here, clamps onto the phone, and then you squeeze to pop it open. And you see the iCracked is one of the best tools because it only opens so far. So it opens up enough so that you don't damage the home button flex cable located here. The tool is fairly inexpensive, but if you're only doing one repair, it's probably not going to be worth it to you. The other way is using an iSesmo or something similar, putting a suction cup on the glass and very, very gently lifting, and enough that you'll see the plastic bezel start lifting up, and there's a little notch just above the audio jack port to allow you to get in here and open the screen up. Now this can be difficult, especially if your glass is badly broken down here, in which case you're going to have to put multiple layers of packing tape so that your suction cup really grabs the glass. And the other risk is if you pull too hard, you could potentially rip that home button flex cable. So using the suction cup, I'll gently lift enough to get my iSesmo in here and pop up the screen. Once I have that corner lifted, I'm no longer using the suction cup. I'll just use the iSesmo to gently pry it up like that to create my opening, and open it enough so that I can see that cable located right there. Go to remove my suction cup. Now once it's sort of open, you can take the phone and very gently slide it to the right. Which exposes the home button flex cable cowling cover located right here. I'm going to use my nylon spudger. I'm going to gently pop that up by coming to this front corner right here. Go ahead and reach in there and grab that cowling cover. Usually the home button flex cable will come disconnected, but if not, then you can use the cowling cover to pop it up. That way you can now lift your screen to gain the inside of the phone. Now that we have the phone open, the first thing we want to do is disconnect the battery from the logic cord to make sure we remove any possible source of electricity going up to the cables to prevent any kind of damage. Now, using a Phillips screwdriver, we can go in here and remove the 2 screws holding the plate onto the logic board. And then remove the plate itself. Now down here at the bottom, this is your battery connection here. Now one thing you don't want to do is dig in this area to disconnect this. There's a lot of surface mount components located right down here which can be easily damaged and knocked off the logic board, rendering the phone useless. So if you go directly back here, right above this screw, and get your spudger in there, the battery connector will just pop right off. Now that the battery is disconnected, we're going to remove the 4 screws located at the top and the upper EMI shield. Now this corner screw up here goes directly into the frame, so it's not made out of the same material as these other 3. It has less of a magnetic property, but by using a magnetizer and getting a fresh magnetism on my screwdriver, that usually allows me to pick up that screw very easily. Go ahead and remove the other screw located up here at the top. And then the 2 bottom screws. Now, the 2 bottom screws are identical, but the 2 upper ones are different, so you want to keep your screws organized in the same manner in which you took them out. Now that the 4 screws are removed, I'm going to go ahead and pick up my EMI shield and set it up next to my screws so they're not lost. Now we have several cables here. This cable here is for the front facing camera cable, which also includes the ear speaker, upper microphone, ambient light sensor, and proximity sensor. You have this one down here, which is for the LCD. This one here is for the power flex, and the one coming up here underneath this cable is for the digitizer, and this top cable here is for the rear facing camera. And the only ones we want to remove are the front facing camera, the LCD, and the digitizer. So using the pointed end of the nylon spudger, you can go in here and very gently pop these cables up. But if your tip is kind of messed up, it's not going to work too well, and you don't want to be digging in there. You could always use your fingernail to go in and disconnect. Same with the LCD. And lastly, the digitizer. Now we can take the display assembly and set it aside. We also want to make sure that the rear facing camera cable here didn't come disconnected, or the power flex cable also, while we're in the process of removing these. Now there's quite a few items that have to be moved from the original display assembly over to the new display assembly. So So let's go ahead and set the body of the phone aside, and then we'll get started on transferring the key components over, like the thermal plate, front-facing camera, ear speaker, and the home button with biometric scanner cable. So we're going to start at the upper end of the display assembly here. The first thing we want to do is remove the ear speaker retaining plate and the ear speaker itself. Now this held in with 2 screws, and it's clipped on the side and hinged over here underneath the plastic bezel. So go ahead and remove the 2 screws. So you have the bottom short screw and the top long screw. Now on the ear speaker bracket is located here, which it clips underneath the plastic bezel. So you can take and very gently pop that loose, and that will come up, and then rotate this upward, and then it'll lift out. And then go ahead and grab your ear speaker, remove it, and set it aside. Next, we're going to disconnect the front-facing camera cable from the bezel. Now right here below where the ear speaker contacts are, it's held in with some adhesive, and down here in this area is the proximity sensor. Now every now and then the proximity sensor has too much glue from the manufacturing process and gets stuck into the phone. So if the cable's not coming up easily, you want to go ahead and give it a blast of hot air right around here to loosen up that adhesive. Now you can take your nylon spudger and very gently go underneath the cable and very cautiously run it underneath to break the adhesive, and then lift it up. Now some of the components you want to inspect here is this: your proximity sensor and the metal and the plastic bracket. Sometimes that'll come off, and if it does, just go ahead and remove that. Then you have the ambient light sensor right here, and there's a little rubber boot that should stay there. Sometimes it stays stuck down inside the phone. You have the upper microphone right here and the front-facing camera. The other thing is you want to make sure that the ambient light sensor filter, which is a little white piece of material located down here, is in place. Now we have this off. The upper microphone is out of its rubber boot located right here, and we just fold it back to keep it out of our way. Now the next thing we want to do is go ahead and down here to the lower end of the phone, in which case we'll undo the screw, the bottom screw of the thermal plate located right here. Now this screw also has a grounding clip located right there, which you'll see moved. So this screw will come out, and this clip will be on the underside of the screw and should remain on the flex cable. It shouldn't fall out. And then just fold that cable back, and you see here's the clip with the ground holding that screw in place. Now you've got the home button bracket right here, which has 2 additional screws which do come out, and we'll set those aside. We'll go ahead and pick up the bracket, and notice how it went in. You'll see the little slit connected in there goes on the component side of the cable. So when we go to put it back in, we want to make sure it goes in the same direction. And we'll go ahead and set this aside. Now the home button with biometric scanner is all one piece attached to the cable here. Now this area of the cable is held in with adhesive to the plastic bezel. So you may want to blast this area with a little bit of heat, like from a hot air gun or a hair dryer, just to warm it up and help loosen this adhesive. So that when we come in here, we can very gently lift this cable off. If it's fighting you, you're going to go ahead and heat it up. Okay, now that that's separated from the bezel, one thing you don't want to do is pull or jerk and rip and tear this cable. So the next process, we're going to take the flat end of the nylon spudger, press it here against the home button, and very gently break the adhesive loose, and then completely remove this home button as a complete assembly with the cable. And just so nothing gets lost, I like to just go ahead and drop it right in to the new display assembly. Lastly, we're going to remove the thermal plate, which has got now 5 screws. So it's got the screw up here at the top, and then 2 on both the left and right side. Using the Phillips screwdriver, go ahead and remove all 5 of those screws. Now your side screws here are all the same size, so you can mix those up without any problems. But the top screw up here is a different size, so you don't want to confuse that one. Okay, so I've got my 4 side screws out. Lastly, I'm going to take the very top screw. Then I'm going to lift the thermal plate out like so, which will have my front-facing camera cable still attached to it using a copper shielding tape located there and a thermal strip on the underside. Now that we've got all those components removed, the last thing we have to do is remove the ambient light sensor filter and transfer it to the new display. Now the easiest way to get this filter out, since we're not worried about the old screen, is go ahead and pop the front-facing camera bracket off the glass. It's just held in with a little bit of glue. Now we'll take a flathead screwdriver, press it in against the inner edge and twist, and the sticker will break loose. Using a pair of tweezers, go ahead and grab and remove that filter, and immediately set it into the new display assembly so it doesn't get lost. So it ends up looking just like it did from the other one. Now I'm going to inspect the rest of this, make sure my front-facing camera centering ring is in place and the proximity sensor alignment bracket is also in place. Now we're completely done with the old display assembly, and we can start putting all the components back on to the new display assembly. The first thing we're going to do here is go ahead and remove the anti-static cover that's on the back. You want to gently peel this away and make sure it doesn't grab the mirror back here. If you see it starting to lift the mirror back here, just go ahead and lay it down and grab it from a different area to peel it off. Now we're going to put the thermal plate back in place by aligning it back on the back of the new LCD and dropping it down. We'll take the longest screw for the thermal plate and put it right here at the top so that we know that everything is aligned back in place. Then we'll go ahead and put the 4 screws down the side, 2 on the left, 2 on the right. Okay, now the thermal plate is reattached. The next thing we're going to do is go ahead and put the home button retaining plate back into place. So we want to make sure that our home button is passing through the glass of the new display assembly, and that the flex cable drops down onto the alignment pins located there, here. And if they're not lining up, just go ahead and pop it out and set it back in until it drops into place. We'll put the home button retaining plate back in. Remember, the little cutout goes on this side, just like so. And place the 2 screws back into place. And then we'll go ahead and push the other side and you should feel the normal click. Then we'll go ahead and fold the cable back over and attach this screw back into the thermal plate and the bezel. As you can see, the little grounding clip located on that cable there, you want to make sure that it is flush against the thermal plate for grounding. As you can see here, it runs along there, and then the little tab should lift up and be right there. Okay, now that that's done, we'll go ahead and work on the upper end of the phone. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the upper microphone and place it into the rubber boot. You see there's a little hole that it goes into, located right there. So go ahead and very gently push that in. It really helps to have a pair of tweezers with you. Now the new rubber boot can be really tight and difficult to get it in, but eventually it'll pop in and then you'll see it'll sit nice and flush like that. Now looking over the screen and the cable, we want to make sure that the ambient light sensor boot is still on the cable. If it dropped off, you want to put it back in, or you can drop it where it fits alongside here. 9 times out of 10 it stays on the cable. And make sure that the proximity sensor, the old bracket, is not in place so that the new one will drop right into place. So we're going to take the cable and we're going to drop the proximity sensor into place, ensure that the ear speaker contact area drops over the pins, then the ambient light sensor drop into place, and then the front facing camera. So it should just be a real smooth drop in, just like that. You see the cable is dropped over the pins. The bracket is sitting below the thermal plate, ambient light sensor fell into place, and the front facing camera fell into place. So everything should look fine. So next we're going to take the ear speaker and place it back into place. Now if you notice on the ear speaker, it's got this oval area right here, which will sit down inside the rubber boot right here. If you don't get it fully seated, when you use the phone, and the ear speaker will sound very muffled. So if you have a muffled sound, you'll know that the ear speaker isn't sitting in place correctly. So go ahead and set this down. Make sure that everything pops in. And the ear speaker should line up on the pins located up here at the top as well. Just like so. And then we'll take the bracket, which holds this in place. If you look on this edge, it's got this like little hinge that actually rests inside the bezel up here. If you don't get that in place and you put this on, this little tab will pop out and it will actually jam itself against the vibration motor here and prevent your vibration motor from functioning. So we'll get this in here and then drop it down, and it should click and hold into place. Now you see this end didn't fall into place, so now I have to redo it until it all lines up correctly. And if it all lines up, you should be able to let go and everything will stay into place. Now we'll insert the 2 screws, starting with the very long screw up at the top and the smaller screw down at the bottom. Now that we have everything back together, we just want to double check to make sure that Everything is labeled and clicked in. You have your 3 cables. Now, a really important task is to pre-fold the 3 cables before you install this. By pressing right here, you can fold all 3 cables all the way back against the thermal plate. So they all should sit nicely. Now this serves 2 purposes. It prevents you from accidentally pulling the cable and damaging it, because you can very easily pull these out just like so. So that's what we're trying to prevent. So next we're going to reattach the cables to the frame, starting with the digitizer, which is located long ways, and then the LCD, and then the front facing camera cable. Now the most difficult out of these 3 is the front facing camera cable, because the cable comes down at an angle and it naturally doesn't want to stay straight. But while attaching this, you have a tendency to disconnect the digitizer. So you want to always make sure that you have good connections. So the first thing I'm going to do is connect the digitizer here. And notice I'm holding my screen nice and upright. And because I pre-folded the cables, I've gotten these ones out of my way. So I can easily attach this without accidentally bending and damaging the LCD. Now once you're aligned, you should feel it snap, especially the digitizer. You should feel it snap here and snap up here at the top. Now I'm going to place my finger around the LCD to hold it, but at the same time I'm holding the cables here flush against the glass so they don't accidentally apply too much pressure. So now I'm going to attach the LCD. I'm using my spudger here to help me find the slot, and once you find the spot, you'll feel the cable drop into place, and then give it a nice little clamp, and you'll feel it snap down. And then lastly, we're going to do the front facing camera, and the same thing is put it till you feel it drop. Do not force this cable down, because it may be in on one side but not the other, and you could end up damaging the connector down here. Like I said, this is the most difficult cable to connect. You see, trying to connect this one, now the LCD came undone, so now I got to go back and reconnect the LCD. So the key here is patience. Now that all 3 are connected, then I'm going to give each one a little push just to double check that everything is connected. And again, I'm not forcing anything. If you're finding one of the cables isn't snapping down correctly, it could be something as simple as a little piece of dust or dirt has fallen inside the connector, and that's just enough to where these will not seat correctly. Now that I'm satisfied that all 3 cables are connected, then I'm going to go ahead and place the EMI shield back into place, and again using my fingers to hold the screen up so it doesn't fall backward or forward and disconnecting the cables. I'm going to hold this here. I'm going to put in my top screws first on the inside edge here. And then get the kitty corner bottom one right here to hold the cable. Put the inside bottom edge screw back in. And lastly, the alloy screw, which, like I said, doesn't always get picked up by a magnetic screwdriver. So I tend to drop it in place using tweezers, just like so, then tightening the screw. Then I give just a little push on the EMI shield, make sure that it feels correct, and should one of the cables have slightly backed off, it'll pop back into place. And then lastly, I'm going to go down here, reconnect the battery, like so. And before I close it or put this plate on, I want to go ahead and power up and make sure that all my connections are good. Peel off the outer layer. I just want to make sure that I get the Apple symbol. Now, if there was a bad connection of the LCD or damaged LCD, you'll see vertical stripes coming down the screen or a smeared image. That there would tell me that the LCD flex cable is somehow damaged during the repair, or part of the cable is connected. Make sure my digitizer is working. Now you notice the home button will not work because it's not yet attached. I just want to make sure that my display is fine and that my digitizer is fine. If you saw checkered box patterns, that would tell me that the digitizer, the first cable we connected, was not fully seated and you would have loss of touch in that area. I'm going to grab an icon, move it all over. Everything appears to be functioning. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and power down the phone again. And again, you're going to wait for that swirl mark to disappear before we do anything else. Okay, just disappeared. So lastly, I'm going to put the plate back over the battery connector here, and the notched end goes toward the bottom, closest to the bottom speaker, just like so. And then I'll insert and tighten the two screws. And again, I'm still holding the screen up with two fingers to keep it from falling back or forward. Both screws are attached, so my charging port flex cable, which is this one here, is held in by the bracket and the battery's held in here. Now lastly, we're going to connect the home button / biometric scanner down here to its connection, which is just behind the charging port. So the easiest ways to do this is closing the screen down, reaching over, sliding the cable back, just like so, and using combined tweezers and the nylon spudger to lock it back down into place. And you'll feel it snap in when it's completely connected. Just like so. Then we want to reattach the cowling cover. Now if you look at the cowling cover here, you're going to have two small holes on this end and then a hook on this end. The hook will be facing down and be closest toward the bottom of the phone. So I'm going to take this and hook it on the notches located here, and then rotate it down to where it snaps into place. So it should be flush on top of that cable, and now everything's reconnected. Now the top of the phone on the bezel has little notches located here. Now those notches physically slide under the shelf of the frame to keep the upper end inside the frame. So we're going to push that in place so the edge should line up. I'm going to check down here, make sure the cable is folded correctly. You see here, and then close the bottom of the phone, snap that in, and if it's fighting you It's because the top edge isn't flush. And you'll feel the bottom snap in. And once that snaps in, then you can run along the edge and walk it all down. Now at the bottom, like this one here, remember before we started this one, we had a problem with this corner being bent, so it's going to fight me going back on. Now what I can do to help is take my Sesmo and line it here on the frame, not inside but just on the edge, to help guide in there. There, now it popped in, and then walk my finger so we go top, bottom, and then smooth it in. Now the display will have a slight bow and then snap into place, and that's what locks it into place. Now that that's done, we'll go ahead and reinsert the 2 pencil lobe screws. And then power up the phone. And we're going to test everything again to make sure that everything on the phone is fully functional. The first thing I'm going to check is, of course, the power button, which the phone powered up, so the power button's working. Want to make sure the biometric scanner is working. So I'm going to unlock the phone with my fingerprint, and the home button itself works, so that tells me I didn't damage this cable. So my battery is currently at 51%. I'm going to plug it in. Should get a green battery, lightning bolt, and we're going to watch to see if the percentage comes up. Because the reason we do this is when you go in with the iSesmo to open it, there is a risk of damaging the charge flex cable, which runs across the whole bottom edge here. So let's grab an icon, make sure that it moves and the icon doesn't drop. Make sure that it goes cross screen and back to screen. And again, we're going to test our cameras, both front and rear. Record video to test the rear mic and the front mic. Make sure we got Wi-Fi, make sure we got service. If you see this area up here searching, sometimes from disconnecting the battery, it resets the date and time, in which you can reconnect it to a Wi-Fi network and it automatically update the date and time, reboot the phone, and then it should show the carrier in service. And again, we're going to use voice memo to test the proximity sensor and ear speaker. Just going to use the one I recorded earlier.
Test one,
okay, loudspeaker,
2, 3, 3,
volume up, volume down. Also test our mute. I'll switch it over to the ear speaker. Again, test the proximity. Okay, so we know the proximity. Hold this up to your ear.
Test 1, 2.
And make sure you can hear it. Now our battery's up to 53%, so we know there's no damage and that the charging circuit is working. Now we verified everything is all working again. We're done.